class about how it takes a lot of courage to come and talk about hard times in your life. It's a lot easier to talk about things that you're proud of or you've been successful at, but it's a lot harder to talk about hard times in your life. And so I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank them both for coming here and talking to us. So, you have one.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about homelessness because I've had some in my past. But first, I'm going to start off by telling you about my military history. I was in the Air Force, and this was probably years. I'm pretty sure it was years before you guys were even born. A long time ago, like in '94. It's a long time, huh? Long time ago. But I was in the Air Force. I was a dental assistant in the Air Force. I then got out of the Air Force in about year of 2000. So that was a long time ago also, but anyway. I worked as a dental assistant here in Georgia for a while, and then I decided to go back in the military. So I went back in the Army in about 2006. You guys are writing down. You're so cute. But I went back in the military, and I worked as a dental assistant there. And then I decided to get out in 2008. I got out of the military, and I came back to Georgia. The barrier that I had was being a dental assistant and not being certified. Certified is when you get your paperwork saying that you can work as a dental assistant as a civilian. And civilian is outside of the military. So in the military, you didn't have to be certified, but outside of the military, you had to be certified. So I did not have my certification, so it was kind of hard to get a job as coming out of the military. I worked for a little while, and then I lost my job, so it became a little bit hard. You know, it's hard when you don't have a job, then it's hard to pay your bills if you don't have the money. So that's what happened, and that's how I became homeless. At that time, I contacted the 1-800 number for veterans, for homeless veterans, and I moved into transitional housing. So I didn't necessarily stay in a shelter or on the streets underneath a bridge or anything. I stayed in a place in transitional housing. And transitional housing is housing for veterans where you can go and live up to 2 years into a place. It was really a nice area up in Sandy Springs. The only thing with that is it was kind of far away from the VA hospital. That's the military hospital where veterans go, and that's in Decatur. So I don't know if you guys know, but I saw a map that your teacher had, you know, and here's Atlanta right here. Sandy Springs is kind of up here, and Decatur is over here. So it's quite a distance. It's quite, you know, it's kind of hard to get there.
Remember the map I showed you of where the VA is in Atlanta and how far away the VA is?
Yeah, so it's kind of over here. And so it was kind of hard, you know, in transitional housing, but you go and stay in some housing that the military helps you out with paying. You don't have to worry about paying any bills while you're there, and so you can get back up on your feet. During this time, that's when I met some people at United Way. You guys want to write that down, United Way? And United Way was able to help me with some computer classes to get me some computer skills. And they paid for those services. It was a week-long training, and that helped me get back up on my feet and work with the Pro Team. So y'all want to write that down? Pro Team? It's PROTEAM. It's one word, Pro Team, and its abbreviation is for Peers Reaching Out. And we go out and we help other veterans that want to get off of the streets and out of the shelters, and that want to go into permanent housing or some transitional housing instead of staying in the shelters. So,
Sure. So do you remember when we saw the video of Curtis Bell and Leslie Turner?
Yeah.
And that's what Curtis Bell did.
Yeah.
He was on the Pro Team too, and he went out to find other homeless veterans.
So that's what we do. We go out, and right now I am no longer in transitional housing. I have my own place. And so I work with AmeriCorps, and we help to find, insurance. We help get people that don't have insurance to go to the doctor. We help to get them health care and to help veterans go and get these services over at the VA hospital and stuff like that. So we do health care. That's what I do right now. And so that's briefly just an idea of what happened to me and, you know, how I became self-employed again, back employment through United Way, and I'll answer any questions after Gilbert is going to talk to you and tell you his story, okay?
Good morning, or good afternoon. My name is Gilbert Rodriguez. I was in the Army. I served 3 years. I deployed to Afghanistan, and while I was over in Afghanistan, I was hospitalized due to an injury I had moving some equipment. And while I was in the military, while I was in the hospital, I was given the opportunity to take some medication which caused me to have a seizure. This was the reason for my discharge from the military.
Can you explain what a seizure is?
A seizure. It's hard to explain
Yeah.
because it's the medical field doesn't know.
It's a bad reaction to a medicine that you just given.
Right.
A really bad reaction.
It causes a brain injury. Some cases. This was caused for my discharge from the military. It hurt me a lot because I chose. Well, that was my family in the military. I liked those people that I was with, and I wanted to be there to help them out and serve my country. Michelle basically went through a lot of the experiences that I went through, so I don't want to repeat most of it. But once I was discharged from the military, I went through a phase of transitioning from being NBC, which was my job in the military, which is nuclear, biological, chemical. Dealt with a lot of chemicals in the military. It was my job to prevent chemical attacks from happening in America. When I got back to the States and had to discharge from the military, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know too much about what was happening. Prior to coming into the military, the economy was very good, and money was spread out equally between the people, and gas was cheap, and a lot of things were cheap. But when I got out, everything had changed. I wasn't aware of the price fluctuation, which everything risen, gas risen, prices for food risen. Everything was rising from the time I was out.
Can I interrupt you for 1 minute about the economy? So, what he's saying too is that when he went into the military, it wasn't hard to get a job, right? But when he got out of the military, there were a lot less jobs. People weren't hiring people; they were letting people go. So it was much harder for him to get a job.
So I went through a phase of jumping from job to job, trying to find that same, the same amount of money I was making in the military in the civilian world. I couldn't find that same amount of money. I had a lifestyle I was living, which was roughly about $40,000 a year. I got out and I was making about $15,000 a year. And $15,000 compared to $40,000 is a big difference. So I went through a time where I couldn't afford to pay my rent, and it led to me being homeless. When I was homeless, I lost my family because I had a child during the time of my military service. My family couldn't understand what was happening, so they left and I was alone. Being homeless, I didn't know the opportunities that I had being a vet, so I had to live on the streets. And living on the streets, in the car, bouncing from place to place, just trying to find my way. I didn't know the opportunities I had and the people who were available to help me. Reaching out to other veterans, I found that I had other opportunities than living on the streets. And I grew to know a lot of other veterans who are going through the process of same homelessness and transitioning. I went through a program, it was called PCCI, Project Community Connections. The military, the VA, basically they delegate down, which they give out the process of helping veterans to other jobs or other companies. They don't have a team that can go out and find those homeless vets or those vets who don't know about the program that's available to them. So these other programs, the other companies go out and make it aware to the veterans that they have opportunities other than being homeless and on their own. So this company called PCCI helped me get on my feet. Basically, they gave me the opportunity to receive housing, which I am now underneath BASH housing, which is free housing for veterans, which is available to all veterans. But prior to me knowing that, I lived on the street for a year to 2 years. Not only me, but there's other veterans who live on the streets also for long periods of time, not knowing that they have free housing available to them. Once I received the housing, I was able to get back on my feet. But being homeless, you go through a mental stage of depression and anxiety and other mental issues. So once I got back into my own place and I was able to get a job, I had to then mentally make myself ready to transition back into being a civilian, which is a person who's not in the military. It was difficult, but through time and through the care of other veterans who helped me out, talked me through the situation, I built myself up mentally, and I was able to stabilize myself. And through PCCI, I got with United Way, which they gave me the opportunity to go out and reach other veterans and give them the same opportunity that veterans gave to me. So now that I'm in a position to give back the same opportunities that were given to me, I appreciate and I love my job very much, and I can now say that I'm back on my feet, and I like myself.
Gilbert and Michelle, would you say that at United Way we see many civilians in this same situation every day? Would you say that the disconnect happened when you were let out without skills or the knowledge you needed to make it as a civilian, or did the VA drop the ball? Where do you think we can start with trying to correct it so that this doesn't keep happening to veterans when they get out of the military? And who do you think the response should come from first, the VA or the military?
I would say that it would come from the military at the beginning, because they're the ones who's giving you your paperwork saying, thank you for serving, here you go. So I think it has to start with them, training people while you're out there serving your country. You also have to think about home also, and a lot of times you find yourself in the military, you're working, and believe me, we enjoy serving our country, but you're so caught up in serving your country that sometimes you forget about your home. You forget about either your husband, your children. Sometimes they have to go on the back burner because you're so busy working for your country that you forget about family. And so your military people become your family. They become your family, but you have to, like a lot of people that join the military, they're straight out of high school, they don't know much. So when you go in the military, you're looking at the military to try to teach you everything about living, about whether it's your finances, different stuff like that. So I would say it would start with the military, but when you do get out, then they need to make it clear to you that you need to connect with the VAs wherever you live at. and try to get things started from there. And then the VA, sometimes they're so overwhelmed because it's so many veterans that sometimes they're so busy, you know, trying to treat you. And we make jokes about this sometimes in the military. The military will give you, it's a certain medication, they'll give you ibuprofen for everything. Go drink some water, you know, but they're not addressing the problems. Like, people are coming home with mental problems. You know, people can't sleep at nighttime. People have a lot of more issues that are going on that an ibuprofen, a pill won't take care of. So we are meeting veterans that are out there on the streets that they have mental issues. Their mind is not right. They're not in the mind, you know, they're not thinking right. And so the last thing on their mind is to go to the VA and get a pill. You know, that's not going to take care of what they need to take care of, but that's the last thing on their mind. So it's a lot of things that, you know, and I don't know how we can begin to start to help to do this to get better awareness, but it's a challenge that we have to help other veterans out there to get the word out that there's help out there for people.
Mentally, going into the military, you establish a mental state where you are built strong and nothing can harm you. So you establish yourself as being one-track minded, because if you get distracted, then you can cause injuries in the field. So to come from the military and have to transition back into the civilian life, it's very difficult and somewhat impossible, because it's hard to break yourself from the mental state that they put you at. And you really have to just apply the values that you learned from the military and take what you get and apply it to civilian life. The VA, they don't do enough. They don't do enough as far as getting people ready mentally. They give you the pieces of paper that tell you those.
When you leave the military?
When you leave the military, they give you paperwork and numbers to call and people you can contact. But being Army strong as I was, I'm not looking for no help. I can do it on my own, you know, and that's the mental stage that people have. And until they get broken down to the point where they have nothing else to turn to, that's when they go and receive that help.
I wanted to open it up for you all to ask some questions. And remember, on the back of your pages are questions that we all came up with, so you can pull from there. Yes, phone. Can you speak
How
loud?
did you feel like when a friend was injured or killed in the military?
Well, it was scary, you know, to lose someone that's close to you. It was you feel like, you feel sad, you know, because you saw this person every day. You guys shared canteens. A canteen is something that we used to drink out of. And they teach you about the buddy system when you're in the military. You have someone that you want to be connected to at all times, your battle. You hear that a lot of times in the military. So when you find out that a person has passed away and they've been in war or whatever, it's a sad experience, because this was your battle. This was the person that was there to watch your back and you watch theirs. So sometimes things happen to people that we have no control over, you know, but it's a very sad experience.
In my case, initially it's a shock, but in the military, there's a lot of deaths, and you just become numb to it, and you expect it to happen. So it turns into okay, it happens again, and you're just numb to it. You feel nothing a lot of times.
But it also probably makes it harder when you get back, too. Alex.
Did you ever see your family again?
Did you ever see your family again?
Yes, I have been reunited with my family. That's a good question, because I did, my time in the military, I took no leave. I was one who was gung-ho, and I went all for the military. I
Leave
was-
means like he didn't take a break, he didn't take a vacation, right?
Yes, I didn't take no vacation. I stayed with my Army family, and when I got out, I had to speak to my mother again. it was a long period of time.
Henry,
What do you think the VA could do better?
start anywhere.
The VA can have more offices available to the soldiers. The most difficult part about it is you have to go to a regional office to receive VA help. And here in Georgia, I can say it's not enough VA locations available to people. Getting out of the military, you don't take, sometimes people don't take steps and measures to have funds available to them. So you get out and you don't have no money, don't have no transportation, so it's difficult to get to the offices that's going to give you that help. So having more locations will help a lot.
And I would say that they need, right now, they're backed up with trying to help veterans with their benefits. I think I saw in the news that Atlanta might be number 4 ranking with the pending cases. And what I mean by that is that people are waiting to get their benefits. That they can't go to work. They used to serve their country. They cannot go to work every day because they have some kind of physical disabilities or mental disabilities that they cannot go to work. So they put in paperwork to try to get help. But all this paperwork is backed up because there's not enough people to process the paperwork. So they're waiting and they're waiting. And while you're waiting to get help, that's where a lot of people become homeless. So I think if they had more, maybe more staff, or if they open up more, like he said, locations, then to better serve people. You know, there's people out there that need jobs, obviously. So if they employ some of the veterans to maybe work on helping to process some of this paperwork, then maybe they could help in that way.
Whoa, okay.
Wow.
Spencer,
How did it feel to come home from the war to homelessness?
Oh, it was tough. It was real tough because after getting out of the military, my first job I had was working at a stable, basically shoveling horse manure. And to go from serving your country and protecting your country and to do that, it's a very difficult transition.
Danielle,
Why did you join the Army?
I joined the Army because of my father. He was in the military, and I had 2 uncles also who was in the military, so it was a family tradition.
what did you do?
I joined the military because I wanted to, I joined the Air Force because I heard it was the best branch. I'm not just going to say, I heard that it was the better branch than the Army. Sorry, Gilbert, but I joined the Air Force because I wanted to travel. And I got to travel. I went to Alaska. I went to Colorado. Yeah, so I got to travel. That was one of my, I wanted to serve my country, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to travel also.
What I want to ask is, could people ask, since we're going to, when we get together next on Monday, we're going to start brainstorming some solutions for what the VA could do better. Let's gear our questions towards that for right now, okay? For just a little bit. So who has one of those? Zaria. Okay.
Did you go to stand
Evie, you go to stand down.
I did. I went with United Way, and Stand Down is a big day. I guess you guys have heard about it and learned about it. It's a big day that we help other veterans to get gear that's going to help them because they're going to basically be out in the elements. Right now it's really warm outside, but just think about the cold nights that some of these veterans are out there sleeping on the streets. So they gave out sleeping bags, book bags, full of different military gear that help the veterans out there on the streets.
Remember, actually, I just want to tell you this, that one of the people we're writing to, Jennifer Turner Reed, organizes stand downs in Atlanta. She's one of the organizers. Does everyone remember the video when we learned about stand downs? All right, Kelly.
What effects from the war are you still experiencing right now?
Effects from the war I'm still experiencing. I don't sleep too often. It's difficult to sleep because when I was in the military, I was airborne, and being airborne, you got to be deployable within 24 hours. So you don't sleep. Any little slight sound, I'm up, I'm aware, I'm ready to go. But that's about it.
Yes, Paige.
Was your experience in the military what you imagined it would be?
The answer is no. The people that, when you go to sign up, they're called recruiters. They tell you very little about what's going to happen when you go to basic training. And when you get there, it's totally different. So no, it was not what I thought it was going to be, but I did enjoy it very much. I love the Air Force. I love the Army, too, sometimes. But I enjoyed the military.
So let's get back to the VA. Who has a question about the VA? And it can be from here, or it doesn't have to be. Michael.
What problems did you have from the VA? Getting help from the VA?
What problems do you help have?
The first time I went to the VA, I actually wasn't able to get assistance. There was some difficulties with my paperwork, and my medical documents couldn't get faxed, and the location, and trying to find my medical documents, it was difficult for them to do that, which is kind of unbelievable. But I had to go to the VA several times in order to receive benefits and help from them. That was more my issue.
So you would go, and then you'd have to leave because you didn't get the help you needed.
And
You
then
have
I
your
had to
own
come
day.
back again.
Where do you go if you don't get help from the VA? Where can you go?
If you don't get help from the VA, at my point where I didn't get help from the VA, I went nowhere. Went back to the street.
I know some, not to cut you off, but I know some veterans, you know, if they need a medical attention or something at the time, they'll go to the emergency room. And that's what, you know, is costing the hospital so much money, because people are going to the emergency rooms, you know, for every little thing. Because if you go to the VA, you'll be over there all day long, all day, and then, you know, then they'll tell you, hey, you know, come back tomorrow. You know, you probably, if you're homeless and you don't have a lot of money or something to get there, you might have spent your last $2.50 to get there that day. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with the people, the social workers over at the VA that have someone that is homeless. They can call the PRO team, and we can get them, you know, into maybe a transitional bed that day. So I've been talking to some of the people over at the VA, the social workers, to see whether we can get that set up.
So can you explain that a little bit? So like if you go, so the VA doesn't have beds. It doesn't have if you're homeless, you go to the VA, and if you're homeless, where do they then, say you get help, where do they send you? What do they do?
If you're homeless, then you go to the VA and you're not, you know, being admitted that day, like you're not going to spend a night in a hospital, then they try to get you into a shelter, and then you know, with hopes that the PRO team will go to these shelters. If not, they do have access to refer you over to the homeless place that's in East Point. But you're not going, it's not like they're going to say, hey, we've got a place for you today. Here's your key. You know, you have to wait. It's a process. So you may be sent back to the shelter. You may be sent back to live on the street until you run into the PRO team or someone that can help you. So it's a long process. You know, it's not like somebody's just going to show up at, you know, you're sleeping on the streets and they're going to show up and say, here's your keys. You know, you can go stay here for this amount of time. So it is a process. And when you're out there on the streets or you're living in a shelter, that's not really something that you want to hear. You know, especially when you go to the VA, that's the place that you turn to for help. So.
How many people are on the PRO team? Do you know?
Roughly right now we have about 4 people, you know, 2 that are actually out on the streets every day. But it's, you know, that's a small amount of people to be trying to help and reach out to different people every day and go to these different shelters.
Mary.
you guys share a little bit more about maybe in your experience and possibly other vets' experience of trying to get to this regional location of the vets, the VA? You know, we're in Atlanta, it's pretty spread out. What are ways that people have tried to travel to the VA, and what are the barriers? What is causing it to be so difficult to get from point A to point B?
Well, MARTA is, you know, to us, $2.50 is nothing. You know, you can spend 3 times that much at Starbucks with one drink, you know, but to a person that doesn't have any money, $2.50 is a lot. So I would say transportation, MARTA, you know, trying to get a MARTA card. You know, I mean, who do you turn to for a MARTA card when you're staying in a shelter or on the streets? You know, no one's just handing them out like, you know, here's a MARTA card going to your appointment. So transportation is a barrier, the biggest barrier. You know, people are not going to just pick you up in your, you know, in their car like, hey, do you need a ride over to Decatur, you know? So here you are in Atlanta and you have to get to Decatur and you have $1.50. Where are you gonna get the other dollar to get on the bus? You know, and then once you get there, you're gonna need $2.50 to get back to wherever you're going. So it's $5, which once again, $5 to most of us is, hey, that's nothing. I spend $5 on lunch, I spend $8 on lunch, you know, every day. So $5 to someone that's sleeping out on the streets, that have no means to get any kind of, they're waiting to get their benefits. They don't have an address. So they have to go to the VA to check on their benefits. They have no, you know, they don't have a telephone. So, you know, $5 is pretty hard to scrape up sometimes. That, you know, $5, or am I going to spend $5 on transportation, or am I going to spend $5 on eating that day?
And why do you go to the VA? Why do vets go to the VA? If it's one, it takes so much time and money and difficulties to get there. Why even go? What do they do for you when you get there?
The main reason why vets go to VA is because that's what's drilled into your head prior to leaving the military. VA, 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 VA. That's where you go, and that's the only place you can go, and that's what's told to you. That's the only place you can go to start your benefits and to get your benefits established.
Explain what benefits.
Benefits are assets.
Well, they have benefits that are like for, let's say you have a disability. There's benefits that you can get from the military since you served as a veteran that will help you with your living expenses. They have educational benefits to help you go back to school if you want to. There's benefits that would help you if you have PTSD. You know, there's different benefits, but you have to go and see a doctor at the VA. And then they have to see whether you have these conditions. And I've seen people that have come back from war that have one leg, and they tell you, hey, you can still go to work. I'm not saying that you can't go to work, but you're going to have some challenges, you know. So what can we help? How can we help these veterans get back to work? And if we're not willing to give them their benefits, that when you join the military, they say, hey, join the military, you're going to sign up, we're going to take care of you for the rest of your life. If you get hurt, when you come home, we're going to take care of you. So that's why we go to the VA, because there's nowhere else to go. If you go to a regular hospital, Piedmont Hospital, private hospitals, they're going to say, hey, thank you for serving our country, but go to the VA. That's where everybody will send you. So we have no choice but to go to the VA. And there's one VA in Atlanta. And like, you know, if you live in somewhere else here in Georgia, which I just heard this morning from another person that's on the pro team, if he lived in Columbus, Georgia, he was sent to Alabama to receive help. He couldn't even get seen here in Atlanta. So that's the only place that veterans know. We know the VA. That's it. We don't know to go to any other hospitals. Hospitals are not open, you know, because that's a bill for them that they don't want to necessarily rack up on, so they send you to the VA. So,
well, for homeless veterans, everything is free, is what they say, right? And for veterans who are not homeless for 5 years, right? You're supposed to have free medical care and mental health care. Yeah. But they make it so hard to get. Right. Yes. We're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. Jared.
What was on your mind when you were homeless?
The main thing was on my mind being homeless was my family, finding stability and getting back on my feet. That was the main thing. I generally try to stay focused on success and succeeding. So I was mainly focused on getting back on my feet.
Lauren.
Who helped you? Like, is there a specific name or person or company who helped you?
The company that helped me was PCCI, and there was a woman there named Nancy Zimmerman. She actually reached out to me, and she went over above and beyond what her duty was to help me. And I believe if she didn't, I'd probably still be on the street.
How did you meet her?
She was referred to me by someone else. I actually went to VA, and the VA referred me to the East Point office, which was the homeless office. And I got in there at perfect timing, and the only person who was there at the time was one of the directors at the East Point office, and she took me in and actually took me underneath her, and I was given benefits that were exceeding what I was really supposed to get, and they expedited my case, and I'm very grateful for it. Her name was Miss Battle.
Michelle, is there one person who really helped you?
I guess the lady at East Point, there was one lady that, she wasn't actually the person that does intake that day
At the VA?
at the East Point location. And I can't even remember her name because at the time it was just like, oh my goodness, here I am, I'm asking for help, I can't even believe I'm here. You know, I can't even believe I'm in this situation. But she was actually not the person that does the regular job. She was filling in for someone else. And she was the one that stepped up to the plate and was like, you know, you're a veteran, you served our country, thank you, and I'm willing to try to get you some help.
Okay. Does anybody, any other, Mary, do you have any other questions you want to ask? You have another question you want to ask? And then we're going to wrap up.
That's your question, I think,
Put your hands down,
an
okay?
observation of the students in terms of their, just how captivated they seem with your stories, your experiences, and I really appreciate you guys sharing so many details to your story. I guess that moment when you were, down and out, by yourself, alone in the streets, what was that feeling? Was there just a moment where you thought, there's not going to be a solution to my problem and this is it? Or the opposite, was there a moment where you said, you know what, I'm going to be able to get out of this? Can you describe or share a moment while you were homeless that really stands out for you?
I think my moment, I have two children. I have a 15-year-old and a 9-year-old. She's in 4th grade. I think my moment was my daughter, she was going to school and her teacher called me and she was like, her name is Nisha. She said, Nisha came to school and told us that she's in transitional housing. She says, I'm not really trying to be funny, but she doesn't really meet the criteria of what I thought a homeless person would be like, a homeless child anyway. And so, that just goes to show you that homelessness, the face of homelessness is changing. We necessarily don't think, oh, well, I know before I became in this situation, I thought the homeless person was the man underneath the bridge with a sign, standing there saying, I will work for food or I need money. But the faces have changed now, so you never know, who is that close to becoming homeless. You never know who is, in that situation. You just don't know. You could be it could be the server at the restaurant. People that are homeless, they work. They want to work. So you never know. It could be the person that you're sitting next to in church. It could be anyone. So, but for the teacher to say that, I was like, well, she was like, well, I'm not trying to be funny, but your daughter just seems like she's well kept, she's clean, and I didn't know. So, I mean, is it true? And I just felt like, at that point, I've got to change this for my child, because I don't want her to be labeled like, oh, there's a little homeless girl. It's, So that made me feel like, hey, I've got to get myself out of this situation, because I don't want her to think that this is a lifestyle. I want her to understand that this is just a transitional phase that we're going through. But, there's light at the end of the rainbow. So, I wanted her to be able to say, that was something that we did, that we went through, but now we're okay.
I went through a time period where, to speak on what she's talking about, I had a lot of pride within me, and it was difficult for me to ask for help. And so I walked around, and I did not appear to be homeless. I made it my job to not appear to be homeless. I didn't want nobody to know. So, but it hit me at a point where I had to call 211, which is a service that's available to veterans to call when you're feeling down and out and you need some real help. And at that point, I was ready to give up, and I called them and told them I was feeling bad, depressed, and sad. They reached out. They at that point where, like I said, you have to be at the lowest of the low in order for them to help you. At that point, they scheduled me an appointment immediately, and I went to a psychiatrist, and that's when my process really took off, and I was able to get some help. But my daughter is the one who really helped me get back into the mental state that I needed to be in.
So we're going to stop. And I guess the first thing I want to do, kind of similar to what Mary said, is I just want to also say thank you to all of you for listening so attentively, for taking notes, and for asking wonderful questions. I would like to give our guests a standing ovation. Thank you. So